IVM.
Hello one, hello all, welcome to the Diary of the Traveling Professor. And I'm Siddharth Deshmukh, your friendly neighborhood traveling professor himself. Speaking to you from London, no less. Wow, what a trip I had, man, what a trip I had. Right from almost flooding Mumbai, where my flight took off, a long line before getting admitted into the airport, wearing some weird kind of hazmat suit, no, not really, but weird kind of antiseptic suit throughout the journey. And guess what? Masks. Every human being is wearing masks nowadays. So I thought, why not talk to you a little bit about what I observed during this trip and what I observed by just talking to a few people who are involved in the world of fashion. So yeah, this diary entry is one about fashion, guys, and the future of it, to be honest. So one of the things that I figured out was I was just looking at how many people were wearing athleisure, which is the latest thing about fashion nowadays, right? Athleisure it looks as if you're going to the gym, but you're not. You're actually just wearing some really expensive clothes to show off that you don't go to the gym. But anyway, athleisure was everywhere, even in these weird pandemic times, and masks. All kinds of masks, and flowery masks, and good-looking masks, and bad-looking masks, and the officially acceptable masks, and so on and so forth. And then I thought to myself, so what if there is a vaccine tomorrow? What if there's a vaccine tomorrow? And what if we are, free of this weird virus to an extent, of course, because vaccines don't work completely and the rest of it, we know that. But what if we are? Would we wear masks? I suspect we would. They've become a little bit like seat belts. You know what I mean? So we would always have a mask handy. It's like in India, of course, seat belts weren't compulsory till about a few years back. And then when you suddenly decided to wear a seat belt, and the day that you missed it out, you felt that there was something missing. I know every Indian car driver who's gone through this feeling. The fact is that when you actually look at masks, we are going to have a very similar feeling as far as seat belts are concerned, right? You have the ability to actually wear a mask and feel safer. I know it's a psychological thing and it is actually having its roots in reality. But it got me wondering, was there any reason why we wore ties, for instance? And I realized that yes, I did a little bit of a search as soon as I landed in London, and I figured out that we wore ties because it was easy for us to wipe our faces when we were having meals, apparently. Meals. And so there was a functional reason for a tie to be around. Now today, hardly anybody who is not in the banking or financial or venture capitalist sectors actually wears ties, right? We avoid them as much as we can. But there was a time when we were slave to wearing a tie if we were working in the corporate world, and we did not know what its functional use was. But we knew that it communicated a certain kind of authority or a certain kind of trustworthiness or a certain kind of respect or a certain kind of, that you're giving to the situation, to the context. So a tie communicated professionalism. Tie's functional reason was to wipe your face, okay, after you've had a meal, but it ended up becoming a fashion statement of professionalism, okay. I'm sure I'm butchering this and simplifying this, but you get my point. I suspect that this is going to be similar to the mask. Over a period of time, can you imagine yourself 20 years in the future? Hopefully we are both alive by that time. The fact is that we might actually not really understand why we are wearing a mask because we've conquered the coronavirus and the rest of it. But we're still wearing a mask because, that communicates a certain kind of respect to each other and safety and security and blah, 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 and the rest of it, especially in crowded places. Now, I suspect that if this continues for a while, this wearing of masks, this behavior is going to change to an extent wherein it actually ends up losing its functional value but becoming a fashion statement. This fashion statement probably will mean, okay, I respect you and I want to belong and I want to make sure that everyone's healthy and the rest of it. just like a tie signified professionalism. Now, having said this, I also noticed that the fashion statements or the fashion police are already there. I mean, you can see a different level of mask preparation and the rest of it. So I guess it's already in motion. The funny bit is you already do, to be honest. You will have people who don't wear masks saying, hey, I don't care about masks. And then you'll have people who do wear masks, and the most beautiful of them, because, you care about society. And you see that all across society, don't you? When you look at fashion. I ended up speaking to a fellow passenger of mine, shout out to Kadambari Lakhani, who is a really famous part of a famous duo of Narendra Kumar Designs. And it was really interesting talking to her because she talked to me about how fashion comes and goes in cycles. So I asked her, okay, what does she think the fashion scene is going to be like once the pandemic is over? Because obviously her sector is one which has been incredibly affected by this pandemic, right? No more live fashion shows, no more runway and the rest of it, and digital shows. And again, I'm not saying positive or negative. I'm just saying this is how it is. So what she did say kind of made me think. She said that after the Great Depression, people started wearing the most vibrant colors, the most bold colors. And the reason was that people were sick and tired of being dull and drab for such a long period of time, right? So they needed to break out of that rut. And the fact is that it's quite likely that we will choose the most vibrant colors, the most, bold outfits after the pandemic is over. Of course, with our masks. But after the pandemic is over, we might choose those kind of designs because we want to get out of a dull, monotonous, drabby life that we have got so far. That told me that actually fashion does come and go in cycles, and it's completely and deeply connected to societal trends that we don't really see. A lot of times we feel that fashion is driven by people, and while that is correct, the early adopters and innovators, of course, are the ones who are defining these fashion trends. And I'll speak about how this happens in a later podcast. But a lot of times we miss out on the underlying trend as to why something is happening, right? So I believe Kadambari Lakhani and her prediction of the fact that we are going to go for the most preeny, showy, vibrant colors when we break out of this epidemic or pandemic or whatever you want to call it, because we will feel that we deserve it. And some of you might argue and say, hey, but what about, people who can't afford it and people who can't do this? And I agree with you. But fashion doesn't follow logic. It's like the peacock. The peacock doesn't follow logic. I mean, there's a huge, huge expense for the peacock's tail. But what the peacock is trying to communicate through its fashion statement of a tail is that it is not afraid of any predators. It can showcase a beautiful display for a female, so it is mate worthy. Now look at what the communication is through the peacock's tail, which is like a tie on a man or, a mask for a pandemic future. Minimalists of the world possibly might go the other way, and they might say, oh, we are going to pare down and we are only going to work in our track pants and pajamas. So that can be another fashion trend. So there will be these two fashion trends that are competing with each other, the vibrant, loud ones and the minimalistic ones who say austerity and less is more. It'll be an interesting one to watch. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast of mine. As usual, I just want to look at forward topics, the ones which will bring us our future. Yeah. And next level thinking. I hope that, if you want to ever listen to any of these podcasts or any podcasts like these, just go to the ivmpodcast.com or the IVM podcast app. You want to follow my funny side? I make a lot of IGTVs with certain funny insights. I've done one with dealing with fools and on LinkedIn, just funny ones. On LinkedIn, I'm a little serious, by the way. And I do a few YouTube videos as well, wherein I talk to industry experts. I'll give you more details of it in some other podcast of mine. Until next time then, the traveling professor says bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. So it's been a really fun week this week. We've had a great episode with Anand Nilakantha on Cyrus Says. Anand was one of the writers of Bahubali, and it's done some really fun stuff since that. Ashish Vidyarthi also had a really good episode on his show, Begin the Journey. Please do check that out. You do know Yuddha is back, right? Definitely check it out if you haven't. Yuddha is our show about Indian ancient warfare. It's hosted by Anirudh Kanisetti and Aditya Ramanathan. Really great show. You should check that out for sure. And I forgot. Rishikesh was on the network as well. He was on Absolutely Right with Aditi Surana. Do definitely check that out. With that, hope to see you next week.
Namaskar, dear Bandhu. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. These are truly challenging times, and in these times, we need hope. Do take time to listen to my podcast, Begin the Journey. Available on IVM Podcasts, website, app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember, there is hope because there's one life and we are alive.